Hey everybody, it's your boy, and if you're British, you are probably aware that next week, Freedom Day is upon us. Now, for those of you who are foreign and don't know what Freedom Day is, allow me to explain it because it is kind of obvious, isn't it? Freedom Day is the much vaunted day where finally, after 15 months, 16 months, I can't remember, we've been in lockdown and semi-lockdown for so long, I literally can't remember how long it's been. Freedom Day is the day when all the COVID restrictions are gone, and finally, the British people can live their lives the way that we always wanted to live our lives. Normalcy can resume at once. No more mask wearing, no more social distancing, no more stupid one-way systems which corral people closer together, which defeats the whole point of social distancing. No police checkups on people's houses to make sure that they're socially distancing. No more track and trace. No more having to protect the NHS, which is meant to actually protect us. Which is weird because the whole point of the NHS is to protect people and make them healthy. But if it's up to the people to protect the NHS, then that means it's failed at its job and probably should go. But hey, you know what? That's just another argument entirely. All of that will be gone. But not really, no. That's not happening at all. Boris Johnson has instead decided that there will be de facto restrictions. So yes, you will still have to wear masks on public transport. Yes, you will still have to wear masks in shops and in other places like hospitals and things like that. Social distancing will still be a thing, but don't worry, it's all voluntary, even though, let's be honest, it's not really. Guess what, guys? There's an icing on the cake to all this. Remember when they promised they would not bring out COVID passports, despite the fact they originally were going to, but then there was a backlash, then they backtracked? Yeah, they're going to do it. So that means if you go to a large venue, or if you go to a pub, you need to prove that you've been vaccinated. Because, you know, we've got to protect grandma, right, guys? At this point, anybody who still believes the lies of the government and of the politicians and the establishment at large is just a fool. You are a fool. The whole fool me once, shame on you doesn't even work because you've been fooled about several times now. And there are some people who think that, look, their hands are tied because the real people that are pulling their strings are preventing them from doing so because they're psychopaths and they enjoy doing this because they're authoritarians. When really, let's be honest, it's because they're spineless cowards. A lot of the Conservatives, and this includes Boris Johnson, would happily allow us to walk around without masks. But they're terrified. They've become hypochondriacs. They're weaklings. They're worried that because infection rates are increasing, but the death rate is actually decreased, that this means that we have to stay in lockdown indefinitely in order to protect us and to destroy a virus that doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. It's going to continue to evolve and become less of a threat. I would love it if there was some kind of secret cabal, some hidden agenda, some people who are lobbying them, who are controlling them, but it's not the case. These are just cowards who have been stuck in a feedback loop and can't stop doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. They've gone mad. They've become stupid, and it's not helped by the millions of people that they and their SAGE advisors, who, by the way, most of them are actually behavioural psychologists. SAGE, for those of you who don't know, who aren't British, SAGE is this scientific body that is meant to advise the government on issues such as pandemics and things like that, right? They're like almost like a crisis group, in a sense. Yet, most of them, at least nowadays, appear to be mostly behavioural psychologists, and communist ones at that. Now, why would a crisis group that's designed to combat pandemics and other such natural disasters need behavioural psychologists? Why? Well, they told us because they wanted people to comply with the totalitarian China-style tactics used to combat the pandemic, using literal fear tactics developed within behavioural psychology in order to scare shitless people in order to comply with these things that they wanted us to do, which has meant that millions of people who were once fairly normal, going about their daily business, not hypochondriac, not terrified of literally everything and everyone, are now too scared to even go out their homes and are terrified of people who aren't wearing masks outdoors. You dare not double mask up, you dare not even wear a mask at all, even when you're outside and you're 3 meters away from them. You're being selfish. You're putting them at risk, guys, okay? You've got to give up your freedom for their safety so that they feel comfortable. Now, some of these people were probably always like that, a little bit narcissistic, a bit selfish, which is just projection. When they call you selfish, it's them that are the real selfish people. But some of them are like that because they're terrified. They've been brainwashed into being like that, and that suits the government and the SAGE communists just fine, because now they have millions of people that they can point to and say, there's our support. Most of the people who we've made terrified, by the way, who we've brainwashed into believing all this stuff, support us. This is where YouGov gets all their data from. What can we do? There's very few things we actually can do. There has been protests, but they've almost exclusively been in London. That's not good enough. They need to be everywhere. They need to be in every single city. They need to be in every single large town at least, in order to show the government that actually those idiots, those useful idiots, are not the majority of the population. They are the people who are in the minority. They're a large minority, but a minority nonetheless. Because I can't believe for a moment that the polls are necessarily telling us the truth about what people actually believe. I believe that most people might be a little bit cautious, might be a little bit scared, but they're not that stupid. They recognise that actually at some point, life needs to go on. We must live with the virus, because in all other pandemics that ever happened in human history, we learnt to deal with these viruses, and eventually they either died off completely or became a relative nuisance at that. I think that's what most people truly believe deep down, but this large minority are being used to prop up this terrible COVID policy. And I think the polls, which as Peter Hitchens has always said, and this is one of the few things I agree with him on, are being used to create public opinion, to make people think that this is what actually people believe and this is where we should go down, when actually it's not at all. So if we're going to protest, we need to protest harder and with more people in more places. The French are probably doing that right now, but with the added French spice of riots. Another thing that we can do is to try and influence the politicians who are in the backbenches to try and revolt. They are where most of the support comes from. You can't win a vote via just the cabinet alone. You have to get most of those backbenchers to back you. And we have to influence these people because, for those of you who don't know, there was recently a vote in Parliament that came completely out of the blue, which is very suspect, with MPs having very little time to prepare, basically voting on whether or not care home workers should be mandatorily vaccinated, which, by the way, the people who advocated for that won, but it was a very close vote. If these backbenchers were emailed constantly about how bad this policy is, how they should represent their actual constituents, and how the constituency doesn't want any of this, then perhaps that vote would have gone a different way. Perhaps the government would have lost and they would have had a rebellion on their hands. We need backbench rebellions because they can make or break a government. So that means, even though it doesn't always work, writing to your MP. I know it's boring, it sometimes is ineffective, but they need to be put under constant pressure because they're there for a reason. You vote for them, therefore you need to write to them and be engaged. Make sure they can't go into their bubble and ignore you. Make sure that you're there and you're heard and they can't ignore you. And even if you're the minority view in your town, make out that you are the majority. It's not hard. The left fool everybody into thinking they're a majority. You can do it too. And if you are the majority, make yourselves loud and proud. But they're the only peaceful methods that I can think of in order to get ourselves out of this situation. Because the other solutions are the French style of doing things, which is riots and violence. And I don't know if things are that bad just yet, but it's pretty damn close. But this is not freedom. This is not a Freedom Day. It was probably never going to be a Freedom Day. And it cannot be freedom because freedom is not granted. Freedom is won. Freedom is something that is a responsibility. Governments can't mandate freedom. The people must take freedom for themselves or to hold it for themselves, defend it. Liberty is a precious thing and it's not something that will last forever. It's something that has to be fought for constantly, every day. And for a lot of people, they're now finding out that most people are terrified of freedom. They're terrified of liberty, the responsibility of it, and they'd rather have somebody run their lives for them. And the best thing we can do is just ignore them and let them hide in their hovels until they eventually realise that if they don't come out, they won't be able to live properly. They will have to be forced kicking and screaming back to their responsibilities. Because to paraphrase one of the founding fathers, if you choose to sacrifice your liberty for safety, you deserve neither. So until next time, I'll see you all later.